So as part of our program today, we thought it would be interesting to convene a panel of some of our board chairs and have Deputy Garrett ask some specific questions about board service. And hopefully that will spur a conversation among all of us about things that we're seeing on our boards and issues that are coming up. And so hopefully that will achieve that. I'll give Jen a little bit of a bio here. Jennifer Garrett was appointed Assistant Deputy Secretary of DSPS in August of 22. She serves as the Chief of Staff for the Secretary, managing external affairs for the agency, including media, legislative, and external stakeholders. Additionally, she serves as a liaison with the governor's staff and other agencies. Before that, she served as Director of Public Affairs. She joined the agency in July 2019 as Communications Director.
Thank you, Sarah. If anyone needs to use my microphone, I will. Otherwise, I'll just try to speak loudly so that I'm not cutting in and out. But as Sarah mentioned, I'm Jen Garrett, I'm the Assistant Deputy Secretary, and I'm very pleased to be here and happy to see all of you. Thank you for your service. I marvel at the work our board members and our council members, committee members do. It's all volunteer, and you do it because of your passion for your professions and wanting to protect the public. So thank you for that all the time. I'm going to allow our panelists to introduce themselves. But I'm the odd duck up here. My awareness of all of this work is a mile wide and an inch deep, but the panelists know their professions inside and out, backwards and forwards, left to right, top to bottom. And their expertise and depth of knowledge really blows me away. And I'm so grateful that we have so many committed and dedicated people willing to take on these roles and do this work for the state. So I'll tell you a little bit about how the panel will run, and then I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves. So we'll do introductions, then I will pose a few questions to each of the panelists, and we'll have a directed conversation that way.
Okay, you need to hear me. Sorry. And then at the end, we will welcome questions from all of you. So with that, I'm going to ask my panelists, beginning with Jen to my right, to introduce themselves. So share your name, your board, your years of service. So when you started this work with us, and briefly, what drew you to this kind of work and this kind of public service? So thank you.
As long as it's lit up green, it should be good.
It's not lit up.
Oh, but
well, I'm Jen Garrett, which has caused a problem when I call in. Yes, two occasions where we get speaking each other. But I work as the chair on the Physician Assistant Affiliated Credentialing Board, but I started working on the PA Council in 2015. So at that time, that was an advisory board on issues related to physician assistants to the medical examining board. But in 2022, physician assistants through Act 23 and legislation created their own affiliated credentialing board. And I was lucky enough to be appointed to that board and have continued serving and am up for reappointment in the next legislative session in January with 3 of my other board members. So we actually created a brand new board that is responsible for discipline of our profession and providing, working through Act 23, which was kind of transformed us a bit in terms of a supervisory relationship to a collaborative relationship with our physician colleagues and navigating how to make that all work within the state. So what drew me to this was was basically not knowing anything about the legislative process at all, but just hearing that there was an opening and that there was an opportunity to kind of see what this was all about for the profession. And the reason I stayed is I do find that there is a great deal of support from DSPS. I think there is a great deal to learn and a different aspect in your profession. Instead of your day-to-day and within your organization, you can have leadership roles there, but in the state, you have a little bit more impact on how your entire state functions safely. And it gives you a much broader perspective of your profession.
My name is Roisin Styczynski. I'm a landscape architect, and I'm a small business owner. I have been on the landscape architect section and joint board of architects, engineers, landscape architects, land surveyors, designers, and newly interior designers. I've been on the board for 20 years. Oh. And then I became chair of the joint board in 2000, well, about 14 years ago. I went through my records, and that's as far back as I could find evidence of my name in the minutes. So it may be longer than that, but it's been very interesting to work through 3 different administrations. I'd say all through that, staff has always been consistently excellent and helpful. So even, I think someone said earlier, that you're the unsung heroes, and that's very true in the years that I've worked. Now I'm blanking out. Oh, I got active because I've always been a person that is publicly active, for the greater good. And so this was a perfect next step for me in my profession to be involved at this level. And through the 20 years, I have seen somewhat of a decline in the dedication of board members to be there for the greater good. And that, we'll talk about that later, but, being around long enough that it's been interesting to see the new people coming on board and how they participate. And it may be that we work together differently. It could be, generational too, and so on. But I've enjoyed all those years, and I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you. I'm Megan Jackson. I'm the chair of the Cosmetology Examining Board, and we oversee estheticians, nail technicians, what else? Electrologists, and I say manicures. Cosmetologists, manicures. It's the one part we're missing. Huh? Well, cosmetologist, well, it's one. It's a multitude of industry. I have been on the board since 2019. I came on during COVID. We did not have an active board for a good long time. I came on as a public school member. I am a licensed instructor in the state of Wisconsin, where I do enjoy teaching future professionals about the industry. And I really got into it because I really became very interested in legislation and where our industry was going. And I love it now because I'm really get to show my students how they can be active in their industry and keep our professionalism going. I now serve as the chair for, I think about 2 years. This is my second term. For 2 years, I am very boisterous, as Will can tell you, about things that's going on in our industry. I really like to get our board members involved. We do have a kind of a newer board, just in different aspects. I don't want them to think that I'm the know-all, tell-all. So just the collaboration of everything that's going on in the industry from all the people in our professions, it really helps.
Thanks, Megan. And Roisin, I just want to point out for the rest of the group, I'm pretty sure you have the distinct honor of sitting on the board with the longest name in the department. and we have a lot of long names. So I wanted to start, and I'm going to start with Megan and then work back. The primary responsibility of the boards is to protect the public. And so I'm just curious, what does that mean to you? And how does in your mind, how does the board do that?
So I think oftentimes when people think of our industry, we think of just hair cutting, or we think of just like normal things that's day to day that people go, that they don't think of the scientific aspect or the safety and sanitation of what we do. And so that's really what we focus on. Sometimes I have to remind people, like, the board is there to protect the public. We are not there to make sure, yes, licensees are getting what they need, but we're also making sure licensees are protecting the public and actively participating in safety and sanitation. So just like bloodborne procedures, that's a big thing. Like if you get cut at a barbershop or a salon, does that practitioner know what to do to prevent communicable diseases from spreading? Skin and scalp diseases, do they know what they can work on, what they can't, what is referred to a doctor? So that's usually what we do when it comes to protecting the public.
So before I move on from you, I just want to say we spoke before to prepare for the panel, and we talked about this a little bit because, as you know, I work for the agency that regulates occupations in the state, and oftentimes there's rhetoric about having too many licenses. And one of the things I hear a lot is, do you really need someone licensed to cut your hair? As though, isn't that the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard? We have, but Megan pointed out a lot of the really critical aspects of the work that you don't think about because most of the time things go well.
Yes. Even just like the chemicals that we deal with, we deal with a lot of chemicals, and if you don't know maybe the allergic reactions or the contraindications of those things when you're applying to people, or consultations, that was a big thing that we were talking about at one of our disciplinary hearings about, well, did they ask the client, well, are they allergic to things like that? It's just things that you would want your doctor to ask, right? And so we're just more, and then just the aspects of the blood. Like that's a big thing, especially now with straight razors, the evolution of our industry. Do people know what to do if they have to? Just know you can't just put a Band-Aid on someone's cut.
So I'm going to move next to Roisin. What does it mean to you? And in your role specifically, how do you do that? Protect the public.
Our board represents a lot of design professions, which often get perceived as we're doing artful work, creative work. And we have to educate the public on the science of what we do and the technical aspects of it. And so when I'm explaining this to constituents and other practitioners, it is for protection of the public. So a lot of the misunderstanding of our professions is they think about it in their personal life. So they think about the people that come to their home, haircutters come in, their cousin. And so I'm often explaining to them that it's protecting the public. So these are primarily public works that are regulated by municipalities, and they're under code, and they have a lot of requirements that they have to meet. And so you have to have this background of knowledge to be able to apply it and make decisions. So once I talk about the public aspect of the application of our professions, people understand. And then the other is to also, when we get new board members, the really new ones often forget why they're really there. They start to get into the subjective things like, are they a good designer? Do things look nice? What's their reputation? And it's really the minimum criteria to be in your profession.
When we talked before, you mentioned some of the specific risks that you're looking to mitigate, or some of the potential harms that could happen if landscape architects aren't practicing competently.
So we work with ADA requirements, so as well as that, so we're paying attention to it. It's also individual safety of tripping hazards, fall hazards. We do a lot of work for schools and playgrounds, so there's child safety in play. There's also, improperly installed irrigation systems that may overspray and start damaging property and so on. So, you know, that's true, you know, in architecture and engineering and so on. And so that, so I get into that a lot with people that, you know, there's physical risk, health risks.
And Jen, we didn't have a chance to talk beforehand, I think because you were either on your way to or from a concert. Um, but if you could answer the same question, what in your mind, what is your role in protecting the public?
I think there's obviously a great need for healthcare and there's a lot of underserved communities and populations in the state of Wisconsin. And we are, PAs are one of many well-qualified options for the citizens of Wisconsin. And PAs are very much interested in creating as safe of an environment for our providers, knowing intimately well the training we've gone through, the credentialing we go through, the certifications that we go through. And it's interesting in our profession, we are at the first point where we are providing guidance on disciplinary cases. And there have been cases in which we are feeling that there's often advice that we receive from the attorneys, and we may most recently have discussed, well, we feel that's too lenient. Maybe we need to rethink this. And because we want to set a precedence for quality and safety for our profession, realizing that as a new board, we are creating precedents for those that come after us on what we believe is a good standard of care.
So I'm going to stay with you for the next question. We've talked today about some of the primary responsibilities of our board. So licensing decisions, rulemaking, and discipline. Those, I would say those are the top three. So I'd love to hear what do you find most challenging about that work, and what has been most surprising about that work?
I think what's been most surprising and is the apprehension of board members not feeling like they know quite what to do. And what's a good outcome is having folks who've never served on a board of this nature before, having them be representatives on the interdisciplinary board, or having them be on the interstate compact, the initiation of a brand new PA interstate compact, and designating folks from our board to get more involved in these things, and seeing them say, oh, I don't know if I can do it, and then having them report back and saying, oh, this is great. You know, we're going to be doing this. And we look to them as a board member and then the community as experts in how are we going to do this? How are we going to move forward and progress in the state of Wisconsin? So that's what I believe.
In a way, and correct me if I'm misrepresenting your words, but some of that experience to me says that your board members know a lot more than they think they know when they come in. They might not know our agency, and they might not know our operations, but they know their professions.
They do. And they come at it from education. They come at it from practicing in the field. They come at it from different specialties. And they actually have a lot of knowledge that enhances, and they have a lot of questions and different angles that they can think of, so that when something gets enacted, we've tried to really think about all of the impacts of what we're doing and what we're saying and what we support as a board.
Before I go to Roisin, any challenges that you want to point out or think, that were bigger than you expected?
There's always challenges, but as a new board, we're trying to become formal members on some boards because for a long time because we were an advisory board under the medical examining board. They served as the representative for us, but now that we have our own board, we'd like to be on the controlled substances board because we do prescribe a lot of medications, for example. And so, and being on this interdisciplinary committee was really exciting that we were asked, and we didn't have to ask, we were asked. So that was great.
Christine, I'll go to you next.
I think I'll go with the challenges and frustrations. Coming.
I didn't say frustrations.
I know, I'm gonna throw, it's a challenge. Once I got on board and people knew who I was, of course, they would start calling me with their complaints. So the frustration is with our statute is we really have no leverage over people who are not licensed. So we have all these, like so-and-so's, going after this work, or they're being allowed to do this work, but we really, as a board, can't do anything, whereas when I'm at national meetings for the CLAR boards, a lot of them have the ability to fine and, and whatever you call it, punish people. So we really, our one thing we can do is deny a license. Now I do, if someone comes to me, I will tell them, maybe, I might say, call our enforcement department. Maybe a letter might be helpful, and maybe someone's just ignorant of the law and so on. But that's probably the one thing that I feel we're hampered. The professions that I'm working with are pretty nice people. They don't like to turn each other in, so sometimes I know something's going on, so I might hint to somebody, but I can turn them in myself. But in general, I just find that, maybe the license does help elevate the profession, and I've seen that since we got our license. But it's the ability to take care of handle the people who aren't licensed that are practicing.
Megan, surprises and challenges?
Well, I would did all the challenges they have said. The other challenge is we have some pretty unique licenses. As for like our establishments have to be licensed. Our schools have to be licensed if you want to teach, and that's one of my biggest frustrations right now. Just really, what are those stipulations when the school is licensed? Like, what are they required to have? And so that's one of the biggest challenges. What was the other one? The surprising.
Surprises.
The amount of rulemaking projects that I have been involved in. I'm so happy that we have a full board now, because now I'm like, anybody want to volunteer to be on this rulemaking project? Because, because our board didn't meet for a long time, because our industry is ever changing, our rules have to be modified to fit the industry, right? To make sure we're protecting the public. And so we might think we're doing good with a rulemaking project, then here comes something else. Okay, we're going to create another one. So, and because we have so many licenses, it could be multiple rulemaking projects going on at one time. So that was the surprising.
So I want to dive into rulemaking a little bit, and then we'll start with you, Megan, but
Okay.
we can go to Rasheen and Jen too. So we talked a little bit about how you're professionals and the work you do top to bottom, but rulemaking is very legal and the language is very different and very specific. And so what was that like when you had your first rule project, and how did you get comfortable with that language and get a facility with that work so that you felt confident that you were making the right decisions?
So when I had my first rulemaking project, we had a different chair, and I was just a public school member. Actually, I think I was a vice chair. And she was like, Megan, could you do this rulemaking project? I said, sure. I didn't really know what I was doing, didn't know anything what a rulemaking project was. I kind of had to Google it and kind of figure out. And so we had a different legal counsel at that time, and they were telling me, giving me very technical words. And so I said, okay, we have to find a happy medium here. This is an industry term, right? And this is the legal term. How can we make this mesh together? And so that's how I approached it. I was very kind of like quiet And, cause okay, what do you all think, cause I don't want to overstep my boundaries. And Joe could tell you right now, I'm like, Joe, tell me if I'm overstepping my boundaries. And he'll give me the, and so, I know which one is which, and I know the backup. But after I went on, it became easier, and we found a rhythm, and, he just said it's like like he loves doing our rulemaking projects. And I was like, you do? And it may be because it's, something new to him, he's learning, and we're learning the actual legal mumble jumble, as you could say. And that's one thing we hear from our licensees. Yeah, it says this in COS 2, but we don't understand what this is saying. And so I was like, we have to find like a happy medium where people can actually read to understand and not just read.
So I'd like to ask Rasheen and Jen the same thing. How do you bridge that divide between your professional language and the legal language so that you're capturing accurately what you want in the rule, but so that the people that you're regulating understand it and can comply?
Yeah, I think my biggest rulemaking effort was the continuing education phase, where we had each of our boards had to do that. We had a very supportive staff. I would recommend a dictionary. And just because you've seen a word 100 times doesn't mean you understand its legal
Yes.
meaning. And therefore, and all those kind of, there's just words all of a sudden that dawned on me one day, don't know what that means. So I started looking up the words. I focus so I can get my legalese head on, and I'll shut the door and I just read line by line. Each of our boards are tasked to do their own rulemaking. So, and then our whole board does rulemaking too. And so it's a collaborative effort. So I might be the person in the room, just making sure the conversation keeps moving and everybody has a chance to have something to say. But, the talent pool of people on your board generally should be tapped. There's some really excellent viewpoints and so on. So through the years, that's been how we've made it through. And the dictionary.
Jen?
Well, we rely heavily on our excellent legal counsel. But it's always surprising that you misplace a comma to have an intent on what you're trying to do, and then you get an interpretation that is completely different than your intent, and you don't know how to necessarily bridge that gap between intent and application. And I think we're still navigating a lot of that, but we have a lot of support. One of our public members is an attorney, which is helpful. But we have really great legal counsel, and we have very good legislative expertise for our board that I can't sing enough of their praises. They just help us immensely, kind of give us, okay, that's what you're trying to say, maybe say this because.
Can I add to that? I think one of the key roles as a chair in the room is always to keep people focused, which I think is what you were saying.
Right.
And so often there's a tendency to over-regulate. And so, it's always steering them back to, that's going too far, that's enough, that's our role. And, there's always great discussion, but it really is keeping them focused.
So Jen, you mentioned your public member, and so I wanted to ask about that. What perspective does the public member bring? Because typically these are people who don't have any industry expertise. And so, and all of our boards have public members. So why are they there and what do they offer?
In our particular case, what I find helpful is again, it's the intent and application of something. Our intent is, the way I view our role is to say, here's the minimum standards we want our profession to follow. Now, organizations can be more strict, they just can't be more lenient. This is the face of what we think provides safe care for patients. And having another perspective outside of the medical profession saying, well, why wouldn't you be more strict than that? Or why wouldn't you say it this way? I think gives us, we all, even within our specialties, have different perspectives, but having someone outside of the profession, I think just embellishes and it deepens what you're trying to accomplish overall.
Megan, do you want to speak?
Well, we just actually got our first public member. We hadn't had one, so she has attended like one meeting, I think, 2 meetings. And I think she's just trying to get, the rhythm of how we run the meetings. But it's a good, actually contribution as a consumer. We're all consumers, but when you are a consumer and an SME, it's something totally different because you take your SME to a whole different level. As for a consumer, hey, I went to go get my hair cut or I went to go get my hair colored, and this is what I thought the person was supposed to do, or if something like I had a allergic reaction, now they can actually say, hey, I feel like, I will feel more safe if I went into establishment, and then we interpret the rule this way.
Do you have anything to add, Rasheen?
Yes. In the years on the Landscape Architecture Board, we've had 4 public members. And the first one was a older woman who through the years became more landscape architect than the landscape architects on the board. She was our best advocate, cheerleader, asked really good questions. Then we had a couple one guy, I thought he might not even exist. So I thought we'd have a cutout of him in all the meetings. And he would never respond to things. Well, he did exist. We finally convinced him to step aside. We had another person that worked for a public agency in another state. So he was sort of torn. So he really wasn't very helpful because he couldn't come to meetings or just didn't. And now our public member is an attorney. So yeah, it's been very helpful. He's quite, the virtual meeting thing has helped a lot with public members. So he participates on that level and does have input. But I don't think he gives us like critique, but he's always will do things if you ask him to.
Next, I want to ask about discipline a little bit. Has your role in disciplining your peers, or how has it affected the way you look at your own practice? And I'll start with you, Jen.
Well, I think what's interesting is that we as a profession are harder on our profession than someone outside of the profession would be on our profession, because we take a lot of pride in what we do and our education and what we're trying to accomplish in our careers and vocations. And I think, but on the other hand, you have to look at things as, is this something that most people would have done, or is this something that very few people would have done? And when you get into these cases where no one really wants to discipline folks, they really don't. But when you come back to what's in the best interest of the public, and that's why we're here, and why we're setting these boundaries. Like, this is a boundary that you need to be very careful not to cross. I think it's taken less convincing for people on our profession to take that stance.
Megan?
To me, I think it's more about integrity for our industry. No, I do not like to discipline. I wish everybody would follow statutes or rules. But sometimes you have to think about what's good for the public and what's good for the industry, right? The integrity. If we let everything fly by, how how professional are we looking to the public? And so getting back to what Jen said, you get the disciplinary hearing or, the papers and you're like, was there, to me, was there a misinterpretation of what they were supposed to be doing? Are they intentionally doing things, right? And so you really have to find that fine line of not putting your professional opinion in it, but really following the rules.
And so explain to me the difference between a mistake and something that was intentional.
Okay, let me think about it. So, we kind of have some blurred lines on establishment license, right? If any, for you that don't know, to own a fully operable establishment under our board, you have to have not only a practitioner's license or have somebody with the practitioner's license running your establishment, or you have to have a practitioner's license and an establishment license. And I think sometimes, depending on what type of education they had before they got to the licensing portion, they might not be aware of establishment requirements. One big thing is because we do have a lot of people that are self-employed. And so one thing, and this is getting more into the financial legal, but being a 1099 employee versus being a 1099, is no such thing as a 1099 employee, meaning that if you work for someone, then you work for them. You're under their establishment license. As for if you are a 1099, you need your own establishment license. And so we get a lot of those cases. I wasn't aware, or I'm renting a space in a larger salon. Do I still need one? So those are kind of like simple mistakes or misunderstandings. One not mistake, that intentional is operating under other people's license. I literally just brought this up about putting the pictures on the licenses, only because an investigator go in, they might have 10 licenses on the wall and it's 10 people in there, but none of those 10 people are the people on the wall. And so you're intentionally operating with no license. And so, those are kind of things like the establishment license. Okay, that was a simple mistake. You give them a corrective warning, but not intentionally have a license. You're harming the public.
That's fascinating because I think about that when I go into places and I see our certificate on the wall, and it is a bit of reassurance, like, okay, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, but maybe not.
Right.
That's fascinating. So before I ask my next question, Rasheen, anything on discipline that you want to share?
I guess, again, it circles back to a lot of it is educating the unlicensed professions. And I've had people, so basically what I'll do is I'll just say you should check out the statute. And I do it as a private citizen. I don't do it as a board chair, but I might just see them at something else, say, you can't say you're affiliated with the licensure boards of the state of Wisconsin and stuff like that. And they usually will say, well, my marketing person came up with that. Or they'll come up with a crafty title for their professional, like they're an associate landscape architect or something. And so I'll say, I think you better check with the law on that. And usually it takes care of it. I'll notice their website changes or they drop some things. So, but otherwise I don't really, we don't do a lot of regulation. We just had an unlicensed person let their license lapse. And so then they were still practicing and selling themselves as a landscape architect. That was the one case I remembered.
So there was a pharmacy and that I saw that they spelled it with an F. And I think we actually got some complaints about that, about how that's that you can't do that. You can't spell it with an F and skirt the regulations for a pharmacy. And I thought, like, nice try. But I'm glad it came into our office.
Can I follow? That's kind of like certification versus licensure, right? Some people say, well, I'm certified in this and I'm certified in this, but how are you certified when you never had a license, right? And so we literally had this discussion at our national board meeting, like, what is the difference between certification and licensure? And so that's a big thing with me. Like, people are like, oh, they're licensed because they're certified. But if the public doesn't know the difference, they think that, I tell people it's less about technical skill and it's more about safety and sanitation. That's what the board is. You can have the great technical skills, but you don't know how to be clean or, again, cleaning up blood or things like that.
Or going to a certification training thing, but it's not really, you're not technically certified.
Yeah,
you're
because
just-
it's not certified by the state or,
Right.
you know, so.
My last question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. But Megan, you had talked about the constant rule projects because your profession is constantly evolving. But one of the goals in rulemaking is also to draft rules that are somewhat flexible so they can accommodate evolutions in practice. And so what are some of the things that are coming in any of your professions that you're excited about, even if it might mean rule projects? And what's keeping you up at night? What do you hear that might be coming down the pipeline that's going to affect the people who work in your industry, the people who use your services? What worries you, either as just a professional or as a board member?
I don't think it's so much worrying. I think it's about how do we find that like a happy medium. As we were just talking about this, aesthetics is like the buzzword of the, not even the country, the world, you know? And what is cosmetic aesthetics versus medical aesthetics? How do they overlap? Who can do what? And so it just with the different machines and different things that and tools that are coming out with the world of aesthetics, how do we regulate that? How do we create rules to make it flexible? Because one thing, me and Joey, you give them an inch and they'll take a mile, right? And so one thing we have to really think about is the public safety. If we say, okay, well, yes, you can use a microneedling machine, but it can be 0.25, which is something they can get, you know, off the, you know, that doesn't have to come from a medical company. Well, what if it's 0.26? You know, things like that. Where do we find that fine line and still give people the financial freedom, economic freedom to be successful? So, and still protect the public. That worries me. Like, and that is something I've been working on aesthetics rulemaking projects since I've been on the board. That we have to keep rehashing almost every rule project, especially with the language, to make it so it's clear that licensees understand it, but also protecting the public.
Jen, I would like, if you can, speak. What I hear a lot about, particularly in healthcare, is AI and how AI is going to change practice and how it's going to make everything easier for clinicians. And can you kind of speak to that as both a clinician and as a board member? What are your feelings about things like AI and, you know, using it and regulating it?
That keeps me up at night for a lot of reasons, not just in healthcare, but lots of reasons. We are having, so I work in an institution that's also a teaching service. And I've been doing this a long time. I don't know technology like the new generation of folks know technology, but they can write their entire note by saying something in AI, write me a note on this. And it's and our job as an instructor is to make sure that they're doing the right things, they're saying all the right things, they're covering all the bases. That's I don't know what you do with that. And I don't know from a practical standpoint, that's kind of coming into your institution. But if your institution is pushing out, we'll use AI for diagnostics or use AI for this. In some cases, yeah, that's helpful, like in radiology interpretation, but there's a lot of personal skill sets that training and experience, I'm worried about that. How is that going to replace your decision making and how you're going to take care of people? And how do you regulate that? When is it okay? When is it gone too far? I don't know how that's going to all happen.
Do you think the rules and statutes as they're written now provide a solid enough framework for that decision making?
I don't think so, because I don't think it's real prevalent yet, at least not in my experience, where, you know, we're hashing out definitions of what's the difference between telemedicine and telehealth. Are they the same thing? Yeah, we decided let's use them interchangeably, but there is a subtle difference. Like you said, if someone's practicing under telemedicine versus telehealth, and then creating interstate compacts. So your training in this state is this, but then you can get a license here. And how does that work if the rules are totally different and your CME, continuing medical education, is completely different and your role is completely defined differently? How do you do that?
Are those words defined in law?
They, and I have expertise here, but I think we have, yes, they are. And we have both the medical examining board and I think the nursing board and our board have worked on making statements that these should be used interchangeably, if I'm right. That's my understanding. Yes, okay, whew. So, but yeah, how insurance companies look at that and regulators look at all of this stuff matters. The words matter.
So before I open it up, Megan, you were shaking your head. So any thoughts before we open up to questions?
Definitions are a thing, right? And they can be interpreted all different ways, like she was saying, telehealth versus telemedicine. So how do we put a legal definition on AI? Is that a actual, you talking into Google? Is it an actual, you typing into a computer? Or is it, it's, when you asked me the question about AI, I was like, oh, that really doesn't pertain. But she talked about education. I mean, we literally have students that, we're learning about anatomy and they'll give us a whole AI definition and they didn't write it, right? Just for having personal conversations with them, we know your vocabulary is not this advanced. And so, I was like, I guess we do. We literally just had this in our faculty meeting about when do we allow AI? And then if we're going to allow it at that level where they're actually going to use it, how we're not going to incorporate it into their actual practice when they're done with the education part.
It keeps me up at night too. Any questions from anyone here? I'll give us a time check. We're at 3:00. Happy hour is 4. Yes.
I have a question that's more for you. And that is, with the Walker administration, they did the review of all the occupations. And I don't know if any occupations or any boards dropped off because of that, but it was a thrust at the time to reduce regulation. Is there any thrust in the legislation today for any removal of boards or regulation? Or has that kind of died out?
I'm going to be careful here. Nationally, sunset reviews are something that occupational regulators talk about, and some states have very robust sunset review processes. Colorado is one that has, I forget the name of the unit, but they have a unit that's been there for a very long time that does sunset reviews on programs, not just licenses. And they do really, really good research on the impact and value of the programs or licenses. They seem to be somewhat nonpartisan or apolitical in how they go about it there. In some jurisdictions, it seems to be more politically motivated and more rhetoric than actual evaluative practice. We have seen some legislation proposed, or not, I don't know at what stage the bill's progressed, but we've seen some and have heard some talk about sunset reviews here. I'm not aware of any plans to reintroduce in the next session, but it's quite possible. In my time at the department, we haven't eliminated any licenses, and the legislature, the legislature has not eliminated any licenses, and it's actually created licenses and boards in the time that I've been there. So I think there's often a disjuncture between legislative rhetoric and legislative action. And there's a lot of reasons why once you create a license, it's difficult to remove it. You probably have seen some of the research that it tends to inflate salaries and provides legitimacy. For example, tattoo artists, their profession got a lot more, their practice, their work got a lot more professional when it was regulated, and there was more legitimacy to their work. And so they've enjoyed that. And when there was a study, I think it was finished right before we came to the administration, or maybe early on. But there was almost no appetite among the licensed workforce to deregulate themselves. So I think the push to do that would have strong opposition. But that's not to say it wouldn't happen. And I do think if you kind of step back from the politics, there is a lot of value to having an independent entity conducting sunset reviews, having the program conduct its own sunset review, or the agency conduct its own sunset review. There's the resource issue, but then I question how objective is the process. And so I like the Colorado model because they have an independent entity. It's kind of housed within, but it's got some pretty strong firewalls, and they produce some good work. So I think they're good models out there. But I don't know what's coming next session for us. Any other questions?
Just like 2 weeks ago, I had the first meeting, so thank you for this. There is a lot of work ahead of us, and I'm just curious to hear from you, Jen, what that beginning felt like and how you moved from an advisory committee to having.
I think it's easy to get overwhelmed. But I think there's going to be a lot more offline discussions as chair and vice chair, leaning on your DSPS colleagues to kind of help you understand the process, understand what your role is going to be, because it seems really overwhelming and daunting. But there is a systematic approach to how everything gets done. And it doesn't have to be done overnight, but taking everything just piece by piece and moving through and realizing, well, this is something we're going to have to deal with at a different time, but this is really important right now that we work through this. And then the rules will change, because then you're like, okay, we've got it. And then there'll be something else that gets thrown your way and you're 99% done. And then you've got to start over almost. But every experience you have makes it easier for everything coming. So, and having a good, really challenging your board to get involved on the board, to do things, to take, say, they may not volunteer to do things, because you can't, as chair and vice chair, you can't do everything.
Right.
But just challenging them, hey, you need to kind of push them. I need you to do this. What do you think? Would you like to do this? And always have like 1 or 2 people in your back pocket, and then their confidence grows, and then it kind of disperses your workload a little bit.
How does it go? How does it work when putting buy-in or getting census from the PAs that are working out in the field to translating the work of the board? How the rules are written?
In our case, there was years of work that went into reformulating the legislation for PAs. So we were lucky in the sense that we had that framework to come in with, to work with. When you're on the board, it's sometimes you hear little bits and pieces from people in the public, but it's really on you to kind of navigate that as a board, because you're not going to get a lot of input from the public until they don't like something you're doing.
Yes.
So they're really, you are going to be a tight group of people that get to, in an exciting way, I think, kind of say, this is the basic framework with which my profession is going to function in this state. And there is a mechanism for people to give you feedback, of course, but you get to decide, and that's really empowering and really amazing for future folks in your profession.
And I will also say, I always, when like, they're coming at me like, we should do this, we should. I was like, well, here goes the next meeting, and here goes public comment section. And so
Right.
all of that is on record. They can write it down, the department has, you know, and it's not something that like, cause you have a very fine line you're walking to, right? You took oath to do this. And so I say, here go public, and then we might talk about it as a board, like what, you know, or legal counsel say, hey, we might need to do a rulemaking project, or, you know, our liaisons. And so I always invite them to the meetings, and I say, right now, I am not the chair. I am your counterpart. And, you know, if you want to talk about that, please come to the public comment section. And, you know, this is your time to say what you need to say. We might not like it, and you might not like what you get back, which is usually nothing. But at least it's documented.
I would like to add that I like public participation in board meetings and rulemaking. I know my colleagues in DPD might not like it as much as I do. But I think our board members don't know what they don't know. And even though they know a lot, there are still things that they don't know, either within their profession or from other stakeholder groups that their work might be affecting. I think it also protects the work and makes it more valid that if they actually have the opportunity to address the challenges and the different opinions and discuss it openly and make a decision, then when the rule is promulgated, no one can come and say, we didn't know, or you didn't consider this. They can say, yes, we did. Here are the minutes. We discussed it on this day. And so it makes the word integrity is accurate. It gives a lot more integrity to those rules. So even though it sometimes can slow down the rulemaking process or just extend the meetings, I think it's incredibly valuable. And I'm very happy when we have high levels of engagement in our rulemaking. And for the most part, from where I stand, and again, my colleagues in DPD might differ, it seems very civil and appropriate and respectful. There, you know, obviously there are exceptions, but when people do come and share their perspectives, I think we end up with better rules, and we end up with better regulation of the professions and better protection of the public. So I wholeheartedly second that. If you have colleagues or just acquaintances who are challenging you or questioning you, invite them to the meetings.
I'd like to add too, it's always helpful to have someone in the room, because there's a tendency to throw everything in the kitchen sink into your rules, because you're trying to protect everybody. And it's always helpful to have someone in the room, whether it's legal counsel or your chair or a member, that says, wait a minute, is this really important to the, you know, the basic requirements of this statute? And so, you know, and you'll also go through iterations, you know, creative things take many attempts. You need some distilling it to, you know, to what's the essence of what you're trying to do. So have patience.
Well, and also to add, your first few meetings are going to potentially be marathon meetings, which
Yes.
will scare your board members to pieces, going, what in the world have I done? I don't have 4
Time.
hours to do
Yes.
this. It's not going to be like that for long. Once you get the hang of things, you're going to be able to move much more quickly through it, but you got to learn the process. There is a process for every single thing you do, how you talk, how you introduce things, how you agree upon things, to have discord on things. All of it is a very set, and you'll get versed on the process. So there's lots of checks and balances.
Any other questions?
Just a comment on your definitions. I'm on the building code committee, and in our code book, we have a whole section on just definitions. And I don't know if you have that in yours, but it's really, really helpful, because that's the first thing we do whenever there's a question that comes up. We go to the definitions. Always what we do. The other comment I have, it might be for DSPS, but the licensing system that we've gone through over my 30 years, from Diller, Commerce, ESLA, and now License E. I don't know why we call it License E, because there's just one E. For electronic.
Oh, electronic.
The calls that I get on that program, it's just frustrating, you know. And we have meetings, and we had a discussion on how many times it took to log in to renew your license. And the average was 7. The best was 4 and the worst was 15. So I don't know if you have your constituents and licensees and credential people complain about that too or not. I'm hoping it gets better fast.
So one thing that I hear all the time is, okay, so I have an establishment license, I have an instructor's, well, we don't have to renew an instructor's license. Well, they have multiple licenses. Can I just have it on one login? And I'm like, that's not my area of expertise. You need to call DSPS. All I can tell you is sometimes you have to put .dsps after your name, after your email. Go ahead.
I just jump in here. I think there are a couple of things to be shared there. I think the first thing is, first, there's a bit of a learning curve. I think with every profession that we've gone through and added to the system, that first renewal or that first go through always is more frequent than subsequent. And we've now seen this now that some of the professions have gone a second and a third time. You develop that muscle memory. I think the second thing is I will address the business and establishment license. So technically speaking, all computer systems are built off of databases. So if you imagine if you imagine Excel spreadsheets, in licensee, the way our vendor initially developed out the system, business licenses and personal licenses were in 2 Excel spreadsheets, right? That didn't talk to one another. And so that is one of the items that's on our high priority list for our current vendor to make an upgrade to the system to merge those 2 databases so that ultimately there will be one login, whether it's a business or a personal license. I think the third thing I'll say, which is both a pain point for the public, but also a pain point for the department, is that, I know just this week I forgot my American Express login like 3 times. The reality is people forget logins. You need a simple and effective way to renew that or remember that and get logged back in, other than emailing or calling the department. And so another item that's on our high priority fix list for our current vendor is to provide an automated constituent remember password type functionality, or the other thing we're discussing. So we're sort of discussing the methodologies at the moment, is some sort of maybe a 2-factor authentication. So if you forget your password, and we've all seen this, maybe you get a text message on our phone number of record with a passcode for a one-time call. So there are certainly solutions, and we've been made aware of some of those difficulties. But like I said, maybe I'm a glass half full person, but our experience has shown us that as people have gotten used to it, that just those first queries go down significantly.
And that's like anything with change. Change is hard for people, and it's sometimes, it might not go right the first time. And some people are just not open-minded like that. But I was like, it's gonna be okay. It'll be all right.
And you've come along, I mean, it has come a long way. So in that 20 years, they invented computers.
Yeah.
And they, so the website was really dysfunctional, and the current version, because I have some background in launching association websites, it is more intuitive. The pathways are a little clearer. I do get calls, we probably do, of people going, I can't find, well, I find out they just never looked.
Or
They
they
just
don't
thought
read.
they could call Rasheen or
Yeah, or
something.
they don't read.
Yeah.
Reading is fundamental.
Yeah.
Well, I will say, I think as much as, and I'm guilty of this. I'm 100% guilty of this. Mike in our office and I go back and forth about this a lot. I call it the application of the world, right? Like this expectation that you shouldn't have to read or dig in just that half layer deeper to understand. And as much as I complain about that, and I'll continue to complain about it, the reality is as an organization, we have to meet people where they're at today. And so I think to a certain extent, yes, but also to a certain extent, I think we can, whether it's the website project or some of these other communication tools that we're working on bringing on board, it's about, again, trying to figure out how to bring them information in a way that they're prepared to consume it so that they can find success in the way they expect to find success. I'll riff off that. And so this is more of a comment than a question, so forgive me. But I mentioned a little bit earlier sort of that concept of providing information to people. And you all were talking about helping people to understand regulations. And so we've been noodling a term, which again, I'll admit it's a bureaucratic term, but I'm going to use it anyways, in our office, regulatory transparency. Like, what does that mean? Like, how do we more effectively communicate what these things mean to people so that they can execute on them? Because we don't want to see them in our disciplinary process. Right. And so I'll give you a brief example. I had a woman who I know personally contacted me from a very large health system. She's a program manager, of a very large health system, very smart person. And she had a question about a licensing requirement. And, you know, quite frankly, I went to the statute, I read the statute. To me, it was all very straightforward and clear. If A, then B, if B, then C, and so on and so forth. And I provided that to her, and then I broke it down. The reality is even very smart people are not used to reading and understanding these things in the way in which attorneys, no offense to the attorneys in the room, need to have them positioned for executing from a legal standpoint. Mm-hmm. And so one of my kind of personal goals or personal pitches is or what I guess I think a lot about when we're not busy doing this, is how do we create systems and methodologies that better communicate this information? Because I actually don't think that government isn't transparent, well, at least not here in the state of Wisconsin, and that it isn't accessible. I just don't think we communicate it very well.
Yeah.
And so that's really just like in our day-to-day working, you know, whether I'm going to a site to inspect something, or half the problems come down to communication. Mm-hmm. And so
I might want to add to that. So when I go to the BARB national meeting, a lot of jurisdictions have their own agency. They aren't part of the legislature and under control of it. And our public advocation is really weak for us. You know, are we empowered to do it? Who are we speaking for? Whose permission do we get? And oftentimes I'll go to professional association events and someone's up there explaining licensure, and then they got things wrong. And I'm like, ah! And then I stand up sometimes if I can or not. So is there any conversation about creating some outreach so we can explain, the licensure, you know, within the blessing of the department, of course. Mm-hmm. I have been tasked to talk about the new license exam. You know, it got renovated. So I was able to go to a conference and explain it. But if we were more proactive about going out there and saying, this is why these professions are licensed, you know, and have a little show or something.
Yeah, it comes down to a resourcing issue. And I think as a department, we agree with that concept, and that could be immensely helpful. One of the, and so as a result, we've sort of been picking and choosing our spots. Mm-hmm. Our credentialing team under the leadership of Nico Rude, he's not with us today, but he's our division administrator. They've been doing a lot more webinars about licensing processes for different professions, sort of on an as needed basis. Yeah. And we've been making an effort to record those and then later, you know, post those online so that they're kind of accessible for perpetuity. The other thing we did quite recently is we commissioned from universities of Wisconsin for additional building code update seminars that are, I don't think they're free, but they're almost no cost.
Way cheaper than what they normally charge. They're charging $250 versus $1,000. And yeah, they're doing 3 or 4 in the state.
I think originally it was supposed to be 4, but we ran out of time to add the 4th for the year. But so we're trying to strategically do more outreach within the limits of what we have. I will say in the last budget we did propose a couple of positions specifically to do that type of outreach to universities and to employers. Those positions were stripped from the budget. We didn't repropose those positions this time, but I think it is a strategic priority to based on, you know, highest need to do more of that work.
Can I add, I know, I mean, this might be a far-fetched, but we know we live in the world of social media. So I have seen other states, with our national organization, you know, you meet people and you become Facebook friends, where they actually tweet, hey, it's time to renew from the department, or, new rule changes, and, you know, are you?
Can I take this one?
Oh, go ahead.
We just hired a communications specialist.
Okay.
She hasn't started yet, but specifically to build out our social media. And if John is still here, he knows that I send him screenshots and of what I see other states doing about board meetings and renewals. So those seem to be pretty easy and simple things we can do. One of the reasons we haven't done it yet is that we didn't have a big social media audience. And so when John started, I would ask him, and other people in the agency would say, can't you just put this on Facebook, or can't you just put this on LinkedIn? And he would say, I can put it there, but no one will see it. And so we've been working very hard over the past year to expand our audience so that we have a big enough base that it warrants doing those posts.
Yeah.
So now I think we're still really small, but we're at a place where we can get into some exponential growth when we start doing that. So we've had to lay the groundwork, but now we have, and now we have the person coming on board. So I think you can expect to see some of those. I don't know that we'll get every meeting and every renewal right out of the gate, but we will be adding those into our social media rotation.
I'll tell you, I follow the Milwaukee Public Library on social media, and I don't even go to that library.
Yeah, and I will.
It's so informative
Yeah.
and clever.
Well, yes, clever comes at a premium. So,
Yeah, attention grab.
right.
Appropriate.
I think let's lower our expectations.
Yeah.
If we can hit clever, that would be great. But again, as the secretary mentioned, a lot of it is resources. We're in one agency that regulates a lot of professions, and doing that excellent messaging on every profession is beyond the capacity right now of our one communications person. We have a staff of one. So
Well,
Our
to
board
start,
actually has a digest that we're still working on, right? Okay. We actually have a digest that was sent out, like a newsletter type thing to every licensee. I know I used to get them, and then, you know, as our board was kind of discombobulated, we kind of but we did start working on, like, you know, allocating or delegating a liaison to I think it's me.
So I'm going to take one last question, and then I'm going to get closing comments from our panel.
Since the one time that people log in is when they're reading every biennium, if nothing else is going on. And would it be possible to have like a pop-up when they're logging in, or when they're re-credentialing? That would be like the state of the biennium that has gone on since the last time they renewed, of like all the legislative things that we passed, maybe new rules that are affecting them, or just various, like, hey, we granted 8,000 licenses in this in this in your profession.
Yeah.
Doctors in your state, right?
It's a really interesting thought. I would, and I think we'll take it back and talk it over. I would say putting it in their congratulations, you've renewed message would be better received than putting it up front when they're logging in to renew and trying to, like, I just want to renew.
you're trying to sell me.
But I think that's a really good idea. And because our renewals are staggered, we wouldn't have to do all of that work and all that kind of summative work at once for all the professions. So it's definitely a good recommendation and a good consideration. So we'll chew on that and see what version of that we could implement.
Just the comment on that. Licensed in other states as an engineer. In some states, part of the continuing education is like 1 or 2 PDHs on the rules and regulations. And so, and that rule and regulation will highlight the changes, whatever they want.
So I now I want to thank our panelists. I've really enjoyed this, and I hope the rest of the audience has found it entertaining a little bit, but mostly informative. And before we close, I just want to start, Megan, we'll work our way back. Any closing thoughts? Anything you wish you had said earlier, or want to say now before we wrap up?
Kind of put me on the spot. Not really. One thing I can say, just as chair, you know, it comes a point in time, I don't know about the 20 years. It comes a point in time where you feel like you have to pass the torch, right? Just prepare somebody on your board to pass the torch too. So it's an
Yeah.
easy transition. I was passed the torch. She prepared me from the day I was on the board. I don't know what stuck out about me, but she was like, listen, I need you to do this. Could you do this? I see it in you. And then when they told her she wasn't gonna serve, she called me like they asked me, and you're ready. And I'm like, am I? And she's like, you are. And I felt like I was ready only because she made me ready, right? I wasn't going in blindsided. So always prepare. I don't care if the whole board, you're educating everybody and getting them involved to be able to pass the torch.
Yeah, grooming your successor.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about social media, and another thought that I've been thinking of lately is the generational differences and the different, you know, like a lot of our boards are comprised of older millennials and boomers. And the new professions coming in are younger and they communicate differently, they process information. We all process differently. And so getting people to serve is getting more difficult.
Yes.
And we fought for years just to get quorum, and some of our boards can't even meet.
Right.
So how do we get people to step up and serve? As you know, and as chairs, that's always been, that's where we lose sleep over. Is it, are we even going to have a meeting?
Right.
And you know, is there a shift on like how boards operate that, you know, virtual meetings helped a lot. I think it gave us ability to be more responsive. But, you know, how do the new professionals value regulation? What form is it for them? I think, you know, if you're not doing it already, you guys seem pretty with it. But that's where I lose sleep, is where are the new people that are going to be there?
Yeah, I share that because it does seem daunting to come on to something like this. And I have folks, and we're going up for reappointment before the legislature in hopefully January-ish. Everybody on my board is a little nervous now. I mean, that's and we want to do this as a volunteer. We want to do this as a service to our profession, but we've seen what's happened to other people because ours is a lot more electric right now. But finding people that are going to want to keep doing it when we're not able to do it. Even if we wanted to, we have term limits and we can't. And so finding new people to come in is hard. And yeah, I don't know.
Thank you. I too think about board recruitment in ways, and Sarah and I have that conversation with some regularity. So we'll continue working on that too. Again, I just want to thank everyone. I just wanted to give the secretary an opportunity to say any parting words before we walk over to the Great Dane.
I'll keep it simple. Thank you.